The morning sun had just started to filter through the tall glass windows of the city. It was another busy day, but for the CEO it wasn't just any regular day. She had been awake since before dawn, preparing for a series of meetings, checking emails, and reviewing reports for her company. Her life was always full of responsibilities. Every decision she made could affect hundreds of employees, clients, and partners. Yet despite the constant rush, she liked to start her day with some small personal errands before heading to the office. That morning, one of those errands was a visit to her bank. For years, she had been a loyal client of the bank, handling both her personal and corporate accounts there. She knew the staff at the branch well, at least those she had regular contact with. She had opened her accounts there when her company was still small, long before it had grown into the successful business it was today. Over time, she had built trust and a quiet understanding with some of the employees. They knew her routine, her preferences, and the urgency with which she often managed her banking tasks. To her, this bank was more than just a place to deposit or withdraw money. It was a part of her daily life, a place where things usually ran smoothly. She walked into the bank that morning, carrying herself with the quiet confidence of someone used to managing high-pressure situations. She was dressed simply but elegantly, not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because she liked to maintain professionalism even in the smallest details. The lobby was already bustling with customers, some standing in line, others talking quietly on the phone. The gentle hum of conversation mixed with the occasional beep from the teller machines. Everything seemed ordinary, and she expected nothing out of the usual routine. As she approached the counter, she noticed the branch manager standing near the front. He was a man in his 40s, confident in his posture and voice, someone who clearly liked to be in control. She smiled politely, expecting the usual acknowledgement. After all, she had handled serious corporate accounts and had been a familiar client for years. However, instead of the polite recognition or greeting she anticipated, he seemed to barely notice her. He was busy checking something on his computer, and when she tried to get his attention, he raised his eyes just briefly, his expression neutral. "Good morning," she said warmly. "I have some urgent transactions I need to take care of." The manager's gaze lingered on her for a second longer, and then he said firmly, "I'm sorry, but I can't assist you today. You'll need to speak with someone else or come back another time." Her words caught in her throat. At first, she thought she must have misheard. "Excuse me?" she asked, surprised. She had expected a polite explanation if there was a problem, but not outright refusal. "You heard me," he replied. "I can't help you. It's bank policy. Please wait for another representative or come back later." The CEO blinked, trying to process what was happening. A small part of her wanted to stay calm and rational, to think that perhaps there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe he didn't recognize her, she thought. That was possible. She wasn't the type to flaunt her position or title. She preferred to be treated like any other client when it came to simple banking matters. "Sir, I think there might be a misunderstanding," she said politely, keeping her tone steady. "I have been a client here for years and I handle significant accounts. I just need to complete some urgent transactions. Surely this can be handled without any issues." The manager shook his head slightly, almost dismissively. "I understand, but the rules are rules. I can't make an exception." Her surprise turned into frustration, though she still maintained her composure. She had faced much more difficult situations in boardrooms and negotiations, but this was different. This was a simple matter of being treated fairly and respectfully, yet she felt like she was being dismissed for reasons she didn't understand. There was a sense of incredulity. How could someone not recognize her? How could someone refuse service to a loyal client, someone who had been part of the bank's growth story for years? She glanced around the lobby. Other customers were looking curiously, sensing the tension. Some whispered to each other, while others pretended not to notice. She realized that this was no longer just a simple banking errand. It had become a matter of principle. She wasn't going to argue rudely or raise her voice, but she knew she had to stand her ground. "Please," she said firmly but calmly. "I'm asking for proper assistance. I have urgent matters that cannot wait. Surely you can check my records and see my history with this branch. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for fair treatment." The manager's expression didn't change. He seemed almost proud of his stance, as if following policy strictly was more important than understanding the situation. His tone remained cold. "I'm sorry, but the answer is no. I cannot assist you." The CEO took a deep breath. She had dealt with difficult personalities before, and she knew the key was patience and professionalism. Losing temper in public never solved anything, and she had always believed in leading by example, even in situations outside her company. Yet inside her mind was racing. She had deadlines, contracts to finalize, and employees relying on her decisions. Every moment wasted here could have consequences elsewhere. She decided to escalate the matter. Pulling out her phone, she called the bank's corporate office. While she was waiting to be connected, she tried one last time with the manager. "I would really appreciate your help here," she said quietly yet firmly. "This is urgent, and I believe the situation can be resolved quickly if we both approach it professionally." The manager didn't respond. He was focused on his computer screen, ignoring her words as if they didn't exist. That moment felt surreal. She had walked into a familiar place expecting routine service, and instead, she was facing outright refusal. She spoke calmly into the phone, connecting with the corporate office. As she explained the situation, her voice was steady, professional, and clear. She recounted her history with the bank, the importance of her transactions, and the refusal of service she had encountered. She didn't shout, she didn't accuse. She simply stated the facts and requested immediate assistance. Meanwhile, the other customers had started noticing the unusual situation. Some were whispering, some were watching silently. The CEO noticed their attention but didn't let it distract her. She had learned long ago that public attention could either escalate a situation unnecessarily or provide quiet support. She chose to remain calm, letting her professionalism speak louder than the noise around her. After a few minutes, a representative from the corporate office assured her that the matter would be addressed immediately. A regional manager was on the way to the branch. The CEO thanked the corporate representative politely and hung up. She turned to the branch manager, who was still standing there, expression unchanged, and said, "Help is on the way. I hope this can be resolved quickly for everyone's sake." As she waited, she reflected on the situation. It was strange how someone could be so rigid, so unwilling to see the bigger picture. She thought about all the times she had worked with employees who were difficult, who challenged her authority or questioned her decisions. In her world, patience, understanding, and professionalism always won. She would handle this the same way, calmly, firmly, and fairly. Soon she heard the doors open, and the regional manager walked in. The tension in the room shifted slightly. The CEO greeted the manager politely, explaining the situation once again. The regional manager listened attentively, nodding as she recounted the events. He then turned to the branch manager, who now seemed slightly uneasy under the weight of the situation. The CEO noticed a subtle change. The manager, who had seemed so confident moments ago, was now quiet. He realized that this was not just about policy. It was about respect, fairness, and accountability. The regional manager began discussing the matter with him in firm but professional terms. As the discussion continued, the CEO remained calm, observing everything. She had no need to gloat or express satisfaction. Her goal was resolution, not confrontation. Yet deep inside, she felt a sense of vindication. Her calm approach, her patience, and her professionalism were turning the situation in her favor. She knew that in the end, fairness would prevail. By the time the conversation concluded, it was clear that the branch manager had crossed a line. He had not just refused service, he had disrespected a loyal client and failed in his duty. The regional manager's decision was firm and immediate. The branch manager would be held accountable for his actions. The CEO finally completed her transactions smoothly, but more importantly, she left the bank with a sense of quiet triumph. She had faced an unexpected challenge, one that had nothing to do with her business or corporate decisions, yet she handled it with the same principles that guided her professional life: patience, professionalism, and integrity. As she stepped out into the bright morning, the city moving briskly around her, she reflected on the lesson the day had taught. Life could throw challenges in unexpected places, even in a simple visit to the bank. Yet the right attitude, calmness, and confidence could turn any challenge into a story of fairness, respect, and accountability. And sometimes standing firm for what was right, even in small ways, could make a lasting difference. The regional manager arrived at the branch quickly, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere. He was a tall, composed man who carried himself with authority, but also with a calm demeanor that put people at ease. He greeted the CEO politely, and she explained everything from the start: the morning's events, the manager's refusal to assist her, and the urgency of her transactions. She spoke clearly, calmly, and without emotion clouding her words, just as she had in the previous part of the day. The regional manager listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. He then turned to the branch manager, who had been standing silently, watching the interaction with growing unease. "Is this true?" the regional manager asked, his voice calm but firm. The branch manager hesitated, his confidence beginning to falter under the weight of the situation. Finally, he muttered something about following bank policy, and that he did not feel comfortable handling the transaction. The regional manager frowned slightly, then turned back to the CEO. "I apologize for this situation," he said sincerely. "No client should ever be treated this way, especially someone who has been so loyal to the bank. Let's resolve this immediately." The CEO felt a wave of relief but kept her composure. She had not wanted to escalate the situation unnecessarily, but now that a higher authority was present, it was clear that the problem would be addressed. "Thank you," she replied quietly. "I just needed someone to handle the matter professionally and fairly." The regional manager gestured toward one of the bank's senior tellers, who stepped forward. "Please assist her with her transactions," he instructed firmly. The teller nodded, and the CEO finally began the process of completing her banking tasks. As the teller worked efficiently, the CEO could finally feel a sense of calm returning, but the incident was far from over. The regional manager addressed the branch manager directly. "You refused service to a client who has been with us for years, and you did so without even verifying her identity or her account history. This is unacceptable." The branch manager opened his mouth to respond, but then paused. He seemed to realize that there was no way to justify his actions. His rigid adherence to policy, without considering context or common sense, had led him to make a serious mistake. He swallowed nervously, aware that the situation had gone beyond a simple misunderstanding. The regional manager continued, his tone firm but professional. "We expect all employees to treat clients with respect and professionalism at all times. Ignoring a client, refusing service, or dismissing their concerns is grounds for serious consequences. Do you understand the gravity of this situation?" The branch manager nodded, his face pale. "Yes," he said quietly. "I understand." The CEO watched the exchange without interrupting. She didn't need to intervene. The regional manager was handling the situation with the fairness and authority that the moment required. She reflected on the importance of accountability. In her own company, she had always believed that mistakes should be acknowledged, lessons should be learned, and systems should improve. Seeing the regional manager handle this with professionalism reassured her that even in stressful situations, respect and fairness could prevail. After a few more minutes of discussion, it became clear that the branch manager would be fired on the spot. The regional manager explained the decision calmly, citing the refusal of service, failure to follow proper procedure, and lack of professional judgment. The branch manager accepted the decision quietly, his pride and confidence replaced by the realization of the consequences of his actions. As the manager collected his personal belongings, other employees watched in silence. Some were surprised by the immediacy of the action, while others felt relieved that accountability had been enforced. The CEO noticed the subtle mix of emotions around her and appreciated the way the regional manager handled the situation without unnecessary drama. It was decisive yet respectful, ensuring that everyone involved understood the reasons behind the decision. Once the branch manager had left, the regional manager turned his attention back to the CEO. "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience and distress you experienced," he said. "This is not reflective of our standards. We will take immediate steps to ensure that something like this does not happen again." The CEO nodded, feeling a sense of closure beginning to settle in. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate how quickly you acted. Mistakes happen, but what matters is how they are handled." She completed her transactions without further issue. Each step was smooth and professional, a stark contrast to the morning's tension. She left the branch not just with her financial matters resolved, but also with a renewed sense of trust in the larger organization. While one individual had failed her, The institution as a whole had acted responsibly and fairly, correcting the mistake promptly. As she stepped outside, the city's noise and movement returned to her awareness. The streets were filled with people hurrying to their jobs, talking on phones, or sipping coffee as they walked. She reflected on how even small interactions could reveal a lot about character and professionalism. A simple act of refusal, left unchecked, could cause unnecessary stress and disrupt the normal flow of someone's day. But handling such incidents correctly, as the regional manager had done, could restore trust and even strengthen relationships. She thought about her own company and the lessons she could apply from this experience. Leadership was not just about making decisions or overseeing operations. It was also about ensuring fairness, understanding human behavior, and taking responsibility when mistakes occurred. The branch manager had failed to see the human side of a situation, treating policy as the ultimate authority rather than considering context or consequences. The regional manager, on the other hand, had recognized the mistake, acted decisively, and maintained professionalism throughout. That contrast was a powerful reminder of the importance of empathy, judgment, and action in leadership. During her walk back to her office, she also reflected on the way people respond to power and authority. Some individuals, like the branch manager, may feel secure in rigid rules, believing that policies alone protect them from accountability. Others, like the regional manager, understand that rules are tools, not excuses, and that fair judgment is essential. The CEO realized that in any organization, systems and policies are only as effective as the people who implement them. Back at her office, she shared the story with a few trusted colleagues, not as a tale of personal triumph but as an example of accountability in action. She emphasized that even in positions of authority, one must respect others and follow proper procedures. Mistakes could happen, but they had to be addressed transparently and promptly. Her colleagues were impressed, both by the swift resolution and by her calm handling of the situation. She had not let anger or frustration dictate her actions. Instead, she had relied on professionalism, patience, and clear communication. The story also sparked a wider discussion within the bank. Employees at other branches heard about the incident and the immediate consequences faced by the branch manager. Training sessions were scheduled, focusing on customer service, recognizing client status appropriately, and handling unusual situations with calm judgment. The bank recognized that one poor interaction could affect their reputation, so they acted quickly to ensure that all employees understood the importance of proper conduct. The CEO noticed a subtle change in her own perspective as well. She had always prided herself on staying calm under pressure, but this incident reminded her that even small moments could test one's patience and professionalism. Handling such moments gracefully not only resolved the immediate problem, but also set a standard for others to follow. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had modeled the behavior she valued: firmness without aggression, patience without passivity, and integrity without compromise. As the day drew to a close, she thought back to the beginning of the morning, when she had walked into the branch expecting routine service. The contrast with the unfolding events was striking. What started as a frustrating refusal had turned into a meaningful lesson about accountability, fairness, and human behavior. The situation could have escalated unnecessarily, but by staying composed, by communicating clearly, and by insisting on proper treatment, she had turned a negative experience into an example of how professionalism and integrity could prevail. She also reflected on the role of courage in everyday life. It did not take shouting or confrontation to resolve the matter. Instead, courage meant standing up calmly for what was right, relying on evidence, and trusting that fairness would eventually prevail. The CEO realized that these small acts of courage, demanding respect, insisting on proper procedure, and staying professional under pressure, were just as important as the decisions she made in her boardroom. By the time she left the bank and returned to her normal workday, the incident had already started to become a story within the company and among the bank's employees. But for her, it was more than just a story. It was a confirmation of values she had always held dear. Leadership, respect, and professionalism were not just concepts for the office. They applied to every interaction, no matter how small or routine. Even as she settled back into her busy schedule, the morning lingered in her mind. She thought about the employees who had witnessed the situation, the branch manager who had been held accountable, and the regional manager who had acted decisively. Each of them played a role in the story, demonstrating that choices mattered and that every action had consequences. The experience reinforced her belief that calm, professional, and principled action could resolve conflicts, restore trust, and even teach important lessons to others. By evening, the CEO felt a quiet sense of closure. The morning's events had tested her patience and professionalism, but they had also highlighted the power of integrity and accountability. She knew that in the long run, these were the qualities that define successful leaders, not just in business but in life. And as she reflected on the day, she realized that even a simple visit to a bank could become a story of courage, fairness, and human values when handled the right way. After the branch manager left, the atmosphere in the bank was quiet, almost tense. The remaining employees exchanged glances, some feeling relief, others slightly unsettled by the sudden turn of events. The CEO remained calm, but she could sense that the incident had already left a mark on everyone present. It wasn't just about her or her transactions anymore. It was about accountability, professionalism, and the culture of the workplace. She understood that her calm response had made a difference. But now the focus was on ensuring that lessons were truly learned. The regional manager stayed behind to supervise the final stages of the CEO's transactions and to address the staff. He spoke with authority but also with patience. "This is an opportunity to reflect," he said, addressing the employees. "Each of you plays a critical role in the way our clients experience this bank. Policies exist for a reason, but so does judgment. Understanding, respect, and common sense are just as important as rules." The CEO listened quietly, appreciating his words. She knew that many times employees simply followed routines without thinking about the human impact of their actions. That morning's incident had exposed a blind spot in how the branch manager had applied the rules. It wasn't just a failure of knowledge. It was a failure to see the human side of service. She had seen similar situations in her own company, where strict adherence to rules sometimes overlooked empathy, and she knew how damaging that could be. As the teller finalized her transactions, the CEO reviewed each step carefully. She had important payments to authorize, corporate transfers to complete, and personal account matters to attend to. Even amid the tension of the morning, she remained methodical and focused. This ability to stay composed under pressure was one of the reasons she had risen to her position. Many people assumed that leadership was all about making big decisions in boardrooms, but she knew it was equally about handling everyday challenges gracefully and professionally. Meanwhile, the employees who had witnessed the incident began to process what had happened. Some were embarrassed, feeling that they should have intervened or spoken up earlier. Others were quietly relieved that accountability had been enforced and that a clear example had been set. The CEO noticed these subtle reactions and realized that this moment, while challenging, could actually strengthen the team's understanding of professionalism and proper conduct. The regional manager, sensing the mix of emotions, addressed the staff again. "We are accountable for our actions," he said. "Mistakes are not the end of the world, but ignoring mistakes, dismissing clients, or refusing service without cause cannot be tolerated. We must learn from this and ensure it never happens again." The CEO nodded silently. She appreciated that he was turning a potentially negative situation into a learning opportunity. In her own company, she often used challenging situations to teach lessons, emphasizing growth over punishment. Today, she could see that the same principle was being applied here. Once all the transactions were complete, the CEO requested a brief moment alone with the regional manager. She wanted to discuss the broader implications of what had occurred. "Thank you for stepping in so quickly," she began. "Your prompt action made a difference, not just for me, but for your staff as well. This could have escalated unnecessarily, but you handled it professionally." The regional manager smiled, a hint of relief showing in his expression. "It was my responsibility. No client should ever feel dismissed or disrespected, especially one who has supported the bank for so long. I hope this sends a clear message about accountability and respect." The CEO agreed, adding, "It does. But I also hope it leads to lasting changes. Policies are important, but the human element cannot be ignored. Leadership is not just about authority. It's about judgment, empathy, and fairness." They discussed how such incidents could be prevented in the future. The regional manager mentioned additional training for staff, focusing on customer service, conflict resolution, and proper recognition of long-standing clients. The CEO suggested incorporating real-life scenarios into the training so that employees could practice handling unexpected situations calmly and professionally. She believed that role-playing and discussion could help people internalize the lessons more effectively than simply reading rules from a manual. As they spoke, the CEO reflected on her own experiences with difficult interactions. She had faced moments in her career when people underestimated her, dismissed her opinions, or even ignored her presence. Each time she had learned that responding with patience, professionalism, and clarity was more effective than confrontation or anger. Today had been no different. By remaining composed, she had ensured that the situation was addressed appropriately and that the right consequences were applied. Meanwhile, customers in the bank observed the changes quietly. They had witnessed the tension, the conflict, and the resolution. Some of them later commented to employees about the professionalism displayed, noting how unusual it was to see such accountability enforced immediately. The incident began to shift perceptions, both for the staff and for the clients. It became a subtle but powerful example of how organizations could take responsibility for mistakes and act decisively. The CEO completed the final details of her banking tasks, feeling a sense of closure. She realized that the morning had been more than a routine errand. It had become a lesson in leadership, respect, and human behavior. She had walked into the bank expecting simple service and had instead faced an unexpected challenge that tested her patience and composure. By handling it correctly, she had turned the experience into something meaningful, not just for herself, but for everyone who had witnessed it. As she prepared to leave the branch, the regional manager spoke one final time. "We will document this incident and ensure that all employees understand the importance of professional conduct. Your experience today will help us improve our practices and prevent similar situations in the future." The CEO nodded. "That is exactly what I hope happens," she said. "Every challenge can be a lesson if handled properly." Stepping outside into the city streets, she felt a mixture of relief and reflection. The morning's tension had tested her in ways she had not expected, but it had also reinforced her beliefs about integrity, accountability, and professionalism. She thought about the subtle power of calm, firm action, and how it could resolve even the most unexpected conflicts. Walking to her office, she reflected on how small decisions by individuals could have far-reaching consequences. The branch manager's choice to refuse service had caused disruption and stress, but the regional manager's quick intervention had restored trust and demonstrated leadership. She realized that in any organization, actions mattered more than words, and accountability could turn a negative situation into a learning opportunity. As she returned to her office and resumed her workday, she found herself sharing the story with colleagues in a quiet conversation. She focused not on personal triumph, but on the lessons the incident offered. Mistakes could happen, she explained, but the real test was how they were addressed. Leadership, she emphasized, was not just about making high-level decisions. It was about observing, responding, and ensuring fairness in every interaction. Later that day, she received messages from some employees of the bank who had witnessed the incident. They expressed gratitude for the way she had handled the situation and admiration for her calm professionalism. She responded modestly, emphasizing that the real lesson was for the bank to improve its practices and ensure that future clients would not face similar difficulties. The story began to spread quietly among colleagues, clients, and employees. It became an example of how proper leadership and accountability could resolve conflicts efficiently and fairly. It also highlighted the importance of recognizing human dignity in every interaction, regardless of status or position. By evening, the CEO felt a sense of closure and clarity. The morning's events had tested her patience and composure, but they had also reinforced her values. She had faced an unexpected challenge, handled it with professionalism, and ensured that accountability was enforced. The incident would remain a memorable example of how calm, principled action could turn a potentially negative situation into a lesson in leadership and respect. As she reflected on the day, she realized that this experience would influence her future interactions. She understood that every person, regardless of their position, could be confronted with unexpected challenges, and that patience, professionalism, and clear communication were essential tools for resolving them. Even as she returned to her normal schedule, the morning lingered in her mind. The lessons she had learned and the example she had set were a reminder that integrity, accountability, and empathy were not just abstract principles. They were practical tools that shaped outcomes and built trust. She had turned a routine bank visit into a story of courage, fairness, and professionalism, demonstrating that even ordinary moments could reveal extraordinary lessons when handled correctly. The following day, the atmosphere at the bank was noticeably different. Word of the previous morning's events had spread quickly among employees, and the energy in the branch had shifted from routine to cautious awareness. Everyone seemed a little more alert, more conscious of their behavior, and more respectful toward clients. The CEO, however, had long since moved past any personal frustration. For her, the situation was no longer about the incident itself but about ensuring that meaningful lessons were taken from it. The regional manager had called an early meeting with the remaining branch staff. He began by addressing the events directly, leaving no room for ambiguity. "Yesterday's situation was unfortunate," he said firmly, "but it was also an opportunity for us to reflect on how we handle our clients, how we follow policy, and how we show respect." He emphasized that accountability was not just about punishment, but about understanding the consequences of one's actions and improving for the future. The employees listened intently, some nodding, some fidgeting in their chairs. There was a mixture of relief that the situation had been resolved fairly and apprehension about their own responsibilities. Many realized that even small actions, like a dismissive gesture or ignoring a client's request, could have serious consequences. The branch manager's sudden departure had made it clear that the organization was serious about maintaining high standards of service and respect. Meanwhile, the CEO returned to the branch to follow up on her pending matters. She wanted to ensure that her transactions were not just completed correctly, but that the process itself reflected professionalism and efficiency. As she entered the lobby, she noticed employees moving with a renewed sense of purpose. Tellers were polite, attentive, and proactive, greeting clients warmly and making sure every interaction was smooth. It was a subtle but noticeable shift, one that spoke volumes about how quickly an organization could adapt when accountability was emphasized. As she approached the counter, the regional manager was already there, waiting to ensure that everything proceeded correctly. He greeted her with a calm smile. "I wanted to personally oversee the completion of your transactions today," he said. "After yesterday, I want to make sure everything is handled properly." The CEO appreciated the gesture but remained composed. She knew that this was not about favoritism, but about demonstrating that proper service and attention could restore trust and confidence. She thanked him and began the process of completing her banking tasks once again. This time everything was smooth and professional. Each step was handled with care, and the staff was attentive to every detail, asking questions politely and ensuring that no mistakes were made. During the process, the CEO observed the employees closely. She noticed subtle changes in their behavior, small gestures of attentiveness, quick clarifications, and an overall willingness to engage with clients thoughtfully. It was a reminder that human behavior could shift quickly when accountability and respect were emphasized. One simple act, like firing a manager who had failed to follow basic principles, had ripple effects throughout the organization. After her transactions were completed, the CEO asked to speak privately with the regional manager. She wanted to discuss the broader implications of what had occurred and how the bank could prevent similar incidents in the future. "Yesterday was a clear example of what can happen when judgment is ignored," she said. "Policy is important, but empathy, respect, and common sense are equally essential. Clients are human beings, not just numbers or accounts." The regional manager nodded in agreement. "Absolutely," he said. "That's why we are taking steps to improve training and ensure that all employees understand the importance of professional conduct. We want every client to feel respected, valued, and understood." Yesterday reminded us that even small failures can have significant consequences. They discussed specific steps the bank would take. Additional training sessions would focus on customer service, conflict resolution, and recognizing clients' histories and needs. Employees would participate in role-playing exercises to practice handling unexpected situations calmly and professionally. The CEO suggested including real-world scenarios from different industries so staff could think critically and apply judgment in varied circumstances. She emphasized that lessons learned in one situation could be applied broadly, helping employees grow and understand the importance of accountability. Meanwhile, the regional manager worked with the remaining staff to address lingering concerns and ensure that everyone understood their responsibilities. He emphasized transparency, communication, and follow-through, explaining that mistakes were inevitable but ignoring them or failing to act professionally was unacceptable. Employees were encouraged to ask questions, seek clarification, and always consider the human impact of their actions. The CEO observed this process quietly, reflecting on how leadership operated at multiple levels. Leadership was not just about managing a company or making high-level decisions. It was also about guiding behavior, shaping culture, and setting examples. The regional manager's approach demonstrated that decisive action, combined with thoughtful communication, could restore trust and strengthen an organization. As the morning progressed, several clients entered the branch. Each interaction was smooth and professional, a stark contrast to the previous day's tension. The CEO noticed subtle expressions of relief and appreciation from clients, many of whom had witnessed or heard about the incident. It was clear that accountability and professionalism had a direct impact not just on employees but also on the client's experiences and perceptions of the organization. At one point, a longtime client approached a teller with a complex request. The teller handled it carefully, asking clarifying questions and confirming details before proceeding. The CEO watched closely, noting the difference between yesterday's rigid refusal and today's thoughtful engagement. It was a practical demonstration of how lessons learned could be implemented effectively. She felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that her experience had contributed to meaningful change. Later, the CEO took a moment to speak with some of the employees individually. She shared her perspective calmly, emphasizing that accountability was not about blame but about growth. She encouraged them to think about how their actions affected clients and colleagues, and to approach every situation with empathy and professionalism. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. Employees listened attentively, some nodding, some reflecting silently. The CEO also reflected on her own role in the situation. She recognized that staying calm, composed, and professional had been crucial. By avoiding confrontation and focusing on facts and clear communication, she had ensured that the situation was resolved fairly and effectively. Her actions had demonstrated that leadership was not about asserting authority, but about guiding outcomes with integrity and patience. As the day continued, the branch began to operate more smoothly than ever before. Clients were satisfied, employees were more attentive, and the overall atmosphere was positive. The CEO felt a sense of accomplishment, not just for resolving her own banking needs, but for contributing to a culture shift within the branch. She realized that even small moments like a refusal of service could become catalysts for meaningful change when addressed with professionalism and accountability. The regional manager continued to supervise operations, ensuring that all processes were followed correctly and that employees remained attentive. He also made a point of acknowledging good performance, reinforcing positive behavior, and demonstrating that recognition was as important as correction. The CEO observed that this balanced approach, addressing mistakes while reinforcing proper conduct, was key to creating a sustainable culture of professionalism. By mid-afternoon, the CEO had completed all her tasks and was preparing to leave. She reflected on the events of the past 2 days, considering the lessons learned and the impact of decisive, principled action. The branch manager's dismissal had been necessary, but the real value lay in the ripple effects: improved staff behavior, renewed client confidence, and a clear demonstration of accountability at all levels. As she stepped outside into the bustling city streets, she felt a sense of closure. The morning's incident had tested her patience, composure, and judgment, but it had also reinforced her core values. Leadership, fairness, and integrity were not abstract.